Question 1, a brief summary of what we did. We started the first week of rehearsing the pantomime by doing an initial read-through of Act 1 with both casts together reading through, occasionally switching parts so everybody got a chance to show what they would do for their part. On the first day we then blocked Scene 1 and Scene 2, and the next day we managed to block Scene 3, or part of Scene 3. We all wrote notes in our scripts and in our notebooks of advice we were given by our second year directors and our tutors, which was very important, and I'll talk about some of those pieces of direction later. We also did some warm-ups that were specifically tailored to the topic that we're doing, which is pantomime, using a lot of commedia dell'arte techniques. These warm-ups were often led by our second year directors, Rob and Cara, which I will also talk about in more detail later. We later managed to finish blocking all of Act 1, and by the end of the blocking process we did a run-through of the entirety of Act 1, including songs, using everything that we had prepared, including any costumes that we already knew we were using, sound effects, people on lighting were also adding in what they had decided they were using. It was basically to see how far we'd gotten and to try and assess which ideas that we'd had were appropriate and which should be used and might not be able to be used. Question 2, discuss what progress you made. I feel like I have made quite good progress in the last few weeks during the blocking process. We've managed to block all the scenes that I'm in for Act 1, which I'm feeling quite confident about. I'm feeling more comfortable with the movements that we're using on stage, which I'm practicing at home to memorise so that I'm aware of where I should and shouldn't be on stage at all times. This should help the production run a bit more smoothly, or the rehearsals should run more smoothly if I know where I should be. We also learnt some of the songs that I'm going to be in, which I was initially worried about, but now I'm feeling more comfortable with. They're not quite polished yet, they need more practicing, but we've been working on the big number at the end of Act 1, One Day More, which closes Act 1. It's a very difficult song, but we've made a lot of progress there. We had small amounts of time with a singing teacher, Georgia, who came in to help us learn this song, because it's quite difficult. Not all of us are singers. I'm not a singer personally, but I feel like I did make a lot of progress with my voice at that point. I was also advised a few things by my second year directors. Cara taught me about gestus, which are small actions that are typically used over and over again by your character on stage, big enough to be recognised by audience members even right at the back of the auditorium, and it helps identify your character, and it's really important for your characterisation, and this is something I wasn't quite as familiar with before, so I feel like I've made progress there. I was also taught by my second year director, Rob, that there are certain modules in the middle of scenes that you can analyse and break up. You break up scenes into small parts, and you can analyse your character's motivation and objectives within the scene, and it helps you know where your character should be focused during a scene. For example, my character Idle Jack is supposed to be in love with the boss's daughter Alice, so often his objective is to get Alice to like him or to get closer to Alice, which really helps me know where I should be focused in a scene. I also feel like I've made progress using appropriate techniques for the current topic that we're covering. Um, we did do a lot of research on Commedia dell'arte, but I think the warm-ups that our second year directors led that used the Commedia dell'arte techniques were very helpful. We did one where one person had to be as upset as they could be, crying and absolutely distraught, trying to get the attention of their partner, who had to be as deadpan as possible and not respond to them, not give them what they want, not give them any attention for how upset they were. And this helped us to understand that sometimes a lack of reaction can be as comedic as an extreme reaction like the extreme crying we were seeing. I just think small warm-ups like that really help us to understand how important it is to think about our reactions all the time. I really think these warm-ups have helped me make progress in using certain techniques in scenes of the pantomime. There were a few new ideas developed as well. I was approached by one of my tutors who had decided that we were going to add in a small few extra lines for my character Idle Jack to help with the plot a little bit. Jack is supposed to be in love with Alice, but to begin with there wasn't much about that in the script. And recently we've added in small parts to do with that. Like at the end of Jack's entrance monologue, he stops and looks to the audience who he has just made friends with and asks, "Can you keep a secret? The real reason I'm here is that I'm in love with the boss's daughter." Adding in these sorts of lines really helps make it clear about Jack's motivation. He's in love with Alice and he sort of follows her around like a lost puppy, which wasn't really there before. We tried out these ideas and we decided that they worked and we have kept them in. They are now written in notes in my script. Because of this development, it also makes him change his attitude toward other characters in the script, like Dick Whittington, who before he was mainly just friends with, but now it adds in an element of resentment and jealousy. He's really jealous of Dick because Dick is the one who falls in love with Alice. Alice falls in love with Dick, and they end up together. So to show this, we added in a few extra lines that show that Jack is not happy with Dick being there. He tries to undermine him every now and again. For example, we added in a line in the script where Dick is bragging about how good of a rat catcher Tommy is, and Jack adds, "If he's such a good rat catcher, maybe Tommy could catch our rat." And he often mimics Dick really childishly to try and undermine him in the situation so that Alice doesn't like him as much. I've also made a lot of progress with my comedic timing, with the help of advice from my directors and my tutors. Occasionally, I was getting the comedic timing slightly off, from just reading the script, and was advised to change the timings that I was using. For example, when Captain Cuttle comes in with the rat trap on his hand, the joke hand that's really painful, Jack's line is, "That looks painful, do you need a hand?" And I was advised to change the timing of this to make it really, really obvious, really cheesy, just a really, really lame sort of joke. And it really helps with the comedy of the piece to change the timing to more like, "That looks really painful. Do you want a hand?" with a big pause in the middle, and look to the audience as if you're expecting a laugh. It really helps to know these sorts of things, and I feel like I've made a lot of progress with my comedic timing in the last few weeks. I think in general I've made progress with making the character a lot bigger all over. For example, his entrance, where he comes in and he teaches the audience to respond to him when he shouts to them, that is a lot bigger than it used to be, louder, with clear diction, a lot of strong projection so that everyone can hear, a lot of energy, and always being really open with the audience. Also, there's a part where he's threatening to throw a bucket of water in scene 3 over the audience, and this has improved with my direction over the last few weeks. It's a lot louder, a lot more taunting, very playful, which really helps with Jack's character, and I think it's improved a lot over the last few rehearsals. Question 3, what was the effect of what you did? As I said before, I think the developments that we've made to Jack's character and the slight alterations to the script have they've made the comedic effect a lot better. I think it's a lot funnier. The audience tend to react with more amusement than they did before. It adds a lot of comedy. It also has the effect of making Jack's character a little bit less two-dimensional. He's not just a playful, fun-loving guy. He is also sometimes over-emotional. He really loves Alice, and I think now it's had the effect that the audience can really see that he's a bit deeper than just the Joker sort of character. He is still remaining typically panto as the Joker sort of character, but that's not all he is. He's quite emotional, and the audience can now see that. They can see that he's in love with Alice, and they can see that his motivation most of the time is focused on Alice, and I think that's very important, and I think it has the effect of really making it clear to the audience that what Jack really cares about. I think the effect of the warm-ups is actually also really important. It's had an effect on the way people perform in rehearsals. It helps us use these small techniques that we've learnt in the warm-ups in our actual rehearsals, and in the final performance it's really helped us to slightly alter what we were doing to make it more appropriate, more typical of the genre. I think it's been really helpful, and it's had quite a profound effect on the way people respond to the audience, the way people address the audience, people's physicality on stage is a lot different. I feel like I've quite improved with my physicality due to the advice we've been given in our warm-ups and the examples that we've been given. It really helps you lose your inhibitions and make sure you are making the character as they're supposed to be, influenced from things like commedia dell'arte or classic pantomime. I think that's had quite an effect on the way people are performing in rehearsals. Question 4. Evaluate how effective the work completed was and say why it worked well or less well. I think it worked quite well when we added in the more emotional parts for my character Jack. I feel like it's really made the character a little bit more than it was before. It also gives the audience more opportunities to interact, which there are already plenty of, but it gives them a chance to have sympathy for a character. Often Idle Jack is the character getting that sympathy because of how he's been rejected by Alice, even though he loves her. He often looks around sadly at the audience to try and get sympathy after Alice has ignored him and is spending more time with Dick or something like that. This often gets a response of the audience going, "Aww," like the typical sympathetic pantomime response from the audience. This makes me think that it is quite effective what we've added in. It makes his character more emotional, and I think that has worked really well. Another thing that's worked quite well is upping the level of physicality used for the character. He is a Joker sort of character. He's playful. He has to be, as a person, very physical in his movements. A lot of the directions are to be more physical, to make the movements bigger. For example, in scene 3, the cooking scene, he has to hit the dame over the head with what at the moment we've been using as a club, but it should be some sort of rubber rolling pin. And to start with, I was a bit scared of hurting Christian, who's playing the dame. But I was advised to let go a bit and that I shouldn't be scared of hurting him because it wasn't going to hurt, and to just hit him as hard as I could with as much physicality as I could, swinging it right back over my head and bringing it down like that with a lot of physicality, really over-exaggerated movements. This, once I managed to do it, actually works really well. It helps. It has a really good comedic effect. It usually gets a laugh from the audience, even though at the moment our audience is our other cast members. So they have seen it before, but it still usually gets a laugh, which is a really good sign. So I think those are examples of work completed that worked really well. I think some things that worked less well, we tried experimenting different things in scene 8 together, where we were trying to discuss whether the sailors should be more like classical sailors or more like pirates. And this works well in some cases. Some of the characters seem to work really well as sailors and the others work really well as pirates. This didn't work as well. I think we've decided that they're going to be pirates at the moment because it lets the actors use a stereotypical sort of pirate gruff accent, and that works better than what we were using before. But to start with, everything was a bit mixed up and it didn't really work very well. So that's an example of something that worked less well. We also tried in a few movements of where Jack tries to get in between Alice and Dick because he loves Alice, and he wants to stop them from getting together. This seemed to work to start with, but later we decided to cut it and keep Jack at the other side of the stage. This is in scene 1, where Jack says, "It's all right, Mum, I'm going to stay here and have a chat with Dick and Alice." We tried the movement of him on that line, moving to stand in between Dick and Alice and linking arms with both of them. In rehearsals this was quite funny, but in the run-through of Act 1 didn't really work very well, and we've decided to take it out because the movement looked a bit unnatural. It didn't make sense for him to cross the stage and stand in between them and then come all the way back to leave the room. It didn't look quite right, so we've taken that out. That's an example of something that didn't work quite well. It looked a little bit unnatural. Instead, we have altered it to something that works more well. like something that works better. Like he tries to say goodbye to Alice, and it's very sad. It's one of those sad moments I described earlier where he gets sympathy from the audience. He turns to her and says sadly, "Bye, Alice." And he barely gets a response from Alice. Alice is not interested in Jack at all, and he basically gets ignored. It's a very sad moment. He looks at the audience sadly for sympathy, and they should get the typical "ah" response that I described earlier. After we changed it to this, I think it started working really well. So that's an example of how we'd altered something to improve it when it wasn't quite working how we wanted it to. Question number 5. Discuss strengths and weaknesses. I feel like one of my strengths recently has been to take direction well. I am a good listener, and I take note of all the direction that I'm by both my tutors and my second year directors, Rob, Cara, and Jason. I'm quite organised writing the notes on my script, writing notes after each session, so that it stays fresh in my mind what I have learnt and what we've covered. I also feel like another strength of mine is that I am quite professional during rehearsals. I feel more comfortable if I'm doing work, and I like to get things done on time, feel like I'm making the best use of my time. Another strength of mine is that I think I was quite familiar with my lines and my cues from the beginning. As soon as we had the script, as soon as I knew I had the part, I was learning my lines. I aim to be off script by the time I go to my next rehearsal. I may need the odd prompt, but at the moment I'm feeling quite comfortable with my lines, and I think that's one of my strengths at the moment. Another strength of mine is that I have upped my my physical presence on stage. My physicality is much improved, and I feel like that's becoming one of my strengths. I was told by one of my tutors when we were given feedback after the run through of Act 1 that my movements on stage were a good example of how we should be moving across the stage. As at one moment I forgot my movements and where I should have been on stage, and as soon as I remembered, I stayed in character and moved to where I should be, in quite a comedic way, constantly facing the audience. When I walk on, I tend to be slightly angled towards the audience, and I almost walk sideways with my front facing the audience all the time. And I was told that that was one of my strengths, that I was quite good at that point, which I was very happy about. One of my weaknesses is definitely my singing. I'm not a very confident singer. I've not done much singing in the past, so my voice is quite weak. Even if I am hitting the right notes, it doesn't quite sound very good, and I can't get much power behind my voice. I have been improving slightly with this, with the advice given to me by our singing teacher. However, it is definitely one of my weaknesses, and I intend to work on this to improve it, as I have a few solo lines to sing in the One Day More song, and it's really important to me that I get these right. I want it to be as professional as possible. And I wouldn't want to let my team down, so I intend to work on the weakness of my singing voice, which at the moment is not very good. I was told from my second year director, Robert, that my strengths were that I had good physicality, good vocals. I tend to use a different voice to my own for the character of Jack, which I was told is good. It suits his character, which I was very happy about. I was told my characterization is quite good. We are going to be working on that more in future, but for the moment, it is quite good, which I was happy about as well. One of my weaknesses, though, that I was told about is that I need to work on my projection. Sometimes it is okay, sometimes it's good, you can hear it at the back. Sometimes I get somewhat distracted and it slips a little bit and gets a little bit too quiet. So I do need to work on my projection. I also need to work on my diction and my timing and my pacing. Those can sometimes be weaknesses of mine. I often gabble a little bit, speak too fast. If I already know my lines, if I have a monologue to say, I sometimes speed it up and say it too fast because I know what I'm going to be saying next. So that is something I need to work on. That is a weakness of mine. I also need to make everything that I do bigger, including all my expressions, because of the genre that we're using. It's not appropriate in pantomime to use such subtle expressions, and that I need to alter these to be huge and very noticeable from the very back of the auditorium. So I need to work on that as well.